A day after this woman appeared outside the state courts without wearing a mask, she has been arrested and handed more charges. More than 6,000 new HDB flats are up for sale, including BTO and, for the first time this year, balanced flats. And actor Terence Chow gets a fine for hosting 12 people at his home during the COVID-19 outbreak. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Now, the woman seen in a viral video not wearing a mask at Marina Bay Sands has been arrested and handed multiple charges for breaching COVID-19 rules. Poon Chu Yok had allegedly failed to wear a mask on at least 4 occasions, the latest incident being just yesterday when she was arriving at the state courts for her trial. Poon was also handed one charge under the Infectious Diseases Act. While serving a 14-day stay-home notice here last year after returning from the UK, investigations showed that she had allegedly left her hotel room on several occasions. She also did not wear a mask while outside her hotel room. Poon will be remanded at the Institute of Mental Health for psychiatric observation. Her case has been adjourned to June the 8th. Meanwhile, Singapore reported 30 new COVID-19 cases today, including 3 in the migrant workers' dormitories and 18 in the community. 15 of these cases are linked to previous infections, with 8 detected during quarantine and 7 identified through surveillance. The Health Ministry added that there are currently 6 unlinked community cases. The other 9 cases were imported, 3 being returning Singaporeans or PRs. Meanwhile, Pizza Hut has deep cleaned 3 of its outlets after 6 COVID-19 cases were reported. The 3 outlets will remain closed for 2 weeks. With the number of COVID-19 cases linked to Jam and Westgate increasing to 50 cases as at Monday night, it has emerged that a hotel cleaner may be the source of that cluster. Based on MOH's investigations into the second largest active cluster here, the cleaner is a 53-year-old woman who works at Park Avenue, Rochester, a stay-home notice dedicated facility. On May 6th, she may have been the source of infection when she visited Westgate, and on May 7th, she was confirmed to have the virus. According to MOH, whole genome sequencing and phylogenetic analysis have shown that some of these visitors to Jam and Westgate have similar sequences to the cleaner. For a closer look, I'm joined by Professor Dale Fisher, an infectious diseases expert from the National University of Singapore's Yong Lin School of Medicine. He also chairs the National Infection Prevention and Control Committee. Welcome back, Professor. In light of this discovery by MOH that a hotel cleaner may be the source of the Jam Westgate cluster, and the measure to extend free testing to those who visited the malls between May 10th and last Saturday. Professor, what are the likely scenarios for transmission to happen in malls?
Thanks, Haryanto. In infection control, we talk about 3 modes of transmission, really. 1 is contact, 2 is droplet, and 3 is airborne. So droplet is perhaps the one people feel most comfortable with because that's where it's from a respiratory secretion. It generally travels about 1 to 2 meters, and people exposed to those sort of secretions, whether it's through coughing, sneezing, or, you know, as we now know, even talking and yelling, singing, this sort of thing, could well be exposed to COVID and develop disease. Now, with these more transmissible variants, particularly the B1617, that is so much more infectious that the other modes of transmission may come up and be more of an issue, such as contact and airborne. We do believe airborne can happen, but we don't believe it's common, and we think it's more common in settings of aerosol generating procedures in hospitals, especially. But, you know, it's possible in the community as well, although low in number. The contact transmission is when you might actually touch someone with COVID, or more subtly, you might touch a surface that's been contaminated by someone with COVID, and catch it that way. So that's why we're always telling people to wash their hands and not touch their face. So the point I'm trying to make is those other two, the airborne and the contact, you may not have been close or have a profound contact with the actual person that's transmitting the disease, because airborne can travel a distance, and obviously the contact, the person may have already left, and then you go and have that exposure.
Right. What about duration, Professor? In terms of brief exposure, is there a possibility then for a person to get infected through brief exposure, versus prolonged exposure, for example?
Well, I think this is right. We know that the more exposure, the more chance you've got of getting it, and that's why household clusters are so prominent, because you're living with that person, and obviously there's a big exposure, and your chance of getting COVID is much higher. If it's a brief exposure, like just passing someone in the supermarket, then it's very unlikely. However, now that we know these variants are more transmissible, that you actually need less virus to cause disease, then yeah, one could easily argue that a lower exposure can lead to infection.
Right. Professor, now I want to talk about the daily figures. Now, looking at the daily figures, the number of locally transmitted COVID-19 cases has hovered between 20 and 30, while unlinked cases is maintained in the single digits. But of course, the number of clusters are increasing, with some clusters growing bigger by the day. Based on all this, Professor, what's your take on our current situation?
I think we would have been happy with this situation if we were offered it 2 weeks ago. The most important thing that we're seeing, or not seeing, should I say, is that we don't have that exponential increase. And when you've seen it happen overseas particularly, and obviously in Singapore this time last year, that the numbers really climbed. Every couple of days there were twice as many. So the fact that we're flat tells me that the interventions are working. It's still early days. We're only in, I think, the second week since all the new restrictions were brought in. And obviously we'd like to see it come down. We think we're seeing the unlinked cases come down. So maybe the number of clusters is becoming more finite, if you like. But we don't need to get back to zero. If it rumbles along like this, I think we'd be okay. We just need to have a situation where the numbers aren't climbing to the point where hospitals are going to get overwhelmed and lots of people are going to die. And with our high vaccination rate of 35% of people having their first jab, and in fact 70% of over 60-year-olds having their first jab, this tells me that the likelihood of severe disease is actually much less. So what was a case a year ago doesn't have the same implications as a case now. So I think we would tolerate an ongoing rumbling of cases while people are getting vaccinated, so that in a few months when we are all vaccinated, then really cases in the community hardly matters.
Right. Well, as always, thank you for your insights, Professor. That was infectious diseases expert from the NUS's Yong Lin School of Medicine, Professor Dale Fisher. In more COVID-19 news, the Health Sciences Authority has approved new storage conditions for the Pfizer vaccine to be stored at a standard refrigerator temperature of 2 to 8 degrees Celsius for 31 days. This is a significant improvement from the current storage conditions of -20 degrees Celsius for up to 2 weeks. HSA said the change will greatly facilitate its transportation and distribution to vaccination centers, as well as their storage and use at these centers. Singapore's full-year economic forecast will not be getting an upgrade despite stronger than expected GDP growth in the first quarter. According to the Trade and Industry Ministry, it's due to the larger than usual degree of uncertainty over the pandemic, both globally and domestically. So for now, its growth outlook for 2021 will remain at 4 to 6%. The numbers will be reviewed again in August when there's more data and greater clarity over the Covid-19 situation. UOB economist Barnabas Gan is here to weigh in. Welcome, Barnabas. With first quarter growth coming in at 1.3%, what do you expect the figures to be like for this quarter? Now, given that Singapore is currently under tighter restrictions during this phase 2 heightened alert period.
Thank you for having me on the show. I think importantly, what we have seen, at least in the first quarter of 2021, has been a good quarter. This is really an upgrade from the previous advanced estimates by MTI. And really in the first quarter alone, we have also seen the positive and more so high frequency data has been constructive, for overall growth. And this includes NODX as well as the manufacturing purchasing managers index. But I think going forward, if really accounting for the phase 2 heightened alert restrictions, I think the first order negative impacts will likely be on the Singapore's retail sector. And this is especially on the food and beverage industry. We have also, we do note that the capacity for retail stores have been further reduced to 10 persons per square meter, and dine-ins will be disallowed during phase 2. But I think overall, what we do note is that phase 2 heightened alert should last until the 13th of June. And the short period of time, really about a month, would unlikely dent Singapore's recovery for the whole year. So we are still keeping to our full year growth outlook at 5.5% for 2021.
Right. On that, Barnabas, looking at MTI's full year forecast of 4 to 6%, do you expect that to change? And what's your outlook? Because you mentioned earlier for UOB it's 5.5%.
Well, the MTI has kept its official growth outlook at a range of between 4 to 6%, but we do note that this is a minor shift away from the previous rhetoric made by the Monetary Authority of Singapore in this previous, or more so in its latest monetary policy statement, whereby they did say and state that GDP growth in 2021 will likely exceed the upper end of the official 4 to 6% forecast range. As I mentioned earlier, we are keeping to our growth outlook, a full year growth outlook at 5.5%. But this is really notwithstanding the phase 2 heightened alert. What we do also expect really is that the social restriction or the social distancing measures will likely impact Singapore's construction as well as services sectors. And we do note that the labor-intensive clusters will likely remain the doldrums, given the ban of all non-residents with recent travel to India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And I think really bearing an exacerbation of COVID-19 restrictions in Singapore, we do hope, that the manufacturing sector especially will be one of the key drivers of growth. And similarly, once COVID-19 risk starts to mitigate further into the second half of this year, we also do hope that and look for positive growth for both construction and services for the second half of 2021.
Thank you, Barnabas, for setting aside time to come on to the show. I've been speaking with Barnabas Gan, economist at UOB. Meanwhile, Singapore drew $2.8 billion in fixed asset investments in the first quarter of this year. And this is expected to create more than 3,700 jobs in the coming years. The largest contributor is the Info Communications and Media cluster, which garnered $1.1 billion of investments. In other local headlines, the Housing Board has launched over 3,800 BTO flats across 4 housing projects in the second sales exercise for the year. The flats are in the Bukit Merah, Geylang, Tengah and Woodlands area. Separately, about 2,500 flats are also on offer in the first sale of balanced flats exercise. HDB also said today that they will release site locations of upcoming BTO projects 3 months before their launch instead of the current 6 months. From next month, passengers booking a ride on Grab will have to pay an additional $1. This a bid from the ride-hailing firm to improve driver earnings amid rising fuel and maintenance costs. And to help commuters adjust to the new fares, the firm is offering $1 vouchers for peak hour rides between June 1st and June 14th. The hike will apply to all transport services except the standard taxi, Grab Hitch and Grab Coach options. Separately, actor Terence Chow has been fined $3,500 after he pleaded guilty today to illegally hosting a gathering at his home during Phase 2 last year. Chow had 12 guests over at his home in Daisy Road, including several celebrities, beyond the 5-person limit at that time. The incident drew flack on social media after pictures of the unmasked group went viral. Across the causeway, preliminary investigations into the collision between 2 LRT trains last night that left over 200 people injured, 6 in critical condition, showed it was due to human error. Malaysia's Transport Minister Wee Ka Siong said it was due to the person driving the train in the wrong direction. A special task force has been formed to give a full report expected in the next 2 weeks. According to Singapore's Foreign Affairs Ministry, there are currently no reports of Singaporeans injured. Now, over in India, an investigation is underway on a couple who chartered a plane to hold a mid-air wedding that broke coronavirus restrictions. Video footage showed the couple and their over 160 guests taking selfies in the packed SpiceJet plane at a time when most states limit wedding guests to 50. Hardly any of them were wearing masks and social distancing rules were blatantly ignored. India's Civil Aviation Authority has suspended the jet's crew, and all the guests and newlyweds could be banned from taking passenger flights. Now, 4 months since US President Joe Biden took office, his administration is still in the process of formulating its China strategy. In our latest ST Connect webinar, Professor Tommy Koh, Singapore's former ambassador to the US, looks at whether stormier days lie ahead for Washington and Beijing.
Many people expected that Biden will bring US-China relationship to what it was during the Obama administration. But in the last 4 years, a lot of things have changed. American public opinion toward China has become very negative. And for the first time in the last 30 years, Americans perceive China as a threat to American prosperity and security. So it's no longer possible for Biden to have the kind of China policy that Obama had in his 8 years.
Now, you can watch the full discussion on the Straits Times' YouTube channel, and you can also drop in on a Clubhouse chat later today between 8 p.m. and 8:45 p.m. And those are our top stories for today. Now, from everyone on the Big Story team, we would like to wish all our Buddhist friends a happy Vesak Day tomorrow. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you on Thursday for more stories on the Big Story.